This is perhaps one of the most depressing topics that I've had to write a talk for. It's quite dogmatic as well, why you will never believe Christianity. But to add to my depression and the constraints that are upon me, I thought that I would give it a subtitle as well. And so what I really want to talk to you about today is why you will never believe Christianity, and neither should you. Now that may sound quite surprising, coming from a person like me. As I've said, I'm an ordained Church of Ireland minister. I've been a Christian now for many, many years. But I do think there are some massive problems with Christianity. And no matter how many good arguments you are given, no matter how compelling and convincing the evidence may be, no matter what reason anyone can provide you with, I do still think that in many cases you will never believe Christianity. I should qualify actually what I just said by saying I do think there are some really good reasons, by the way. Christianity is not a leap into the dark. That's what many people think today. They think that belief, faith, is where it begins, where reason and logic and understanding and your intellect ends. I do think there are some really good, convincing, compelling arguments out there. There was a journalist, actually, some of you may know this, but a journalist in the States a few years ago now called Lee Strobel, and he set out from the position of an atheist to really disprove the claims of Christianity. He wrote a book about it, and the book's called The Case for Christ. And what he does essentially is he goes and looks at all of the most difficult questions that Christianity has to answer, and he goes around the experts. And what the book essentially does, The Case for Christ, what essentially it does is it charts his journey over the course of 2 years, from antagonism to understanding to acquiescence, and then eventually he himself came to see that actually there was no reason for him not to believe. He says this in one part of his books. He says, "To continue in atheism, I would need to believe that nothing produces everything, non-life produces life, randomness produces fine-tuning, chaos produces information, unconsciousness produces consciousness, and non-reason produces reason." Then he says, "I simply didn't have that much faith." So I do think there are some really good, compelling arguments. I do think the evidence out there is convincing. But as the topic of today's talk is why you will never believe, I want to show you why you won't. No matter how much you're given, no matter how good the arguments are, I want to show you why you won't. And my aim in this talk, actually, is that at the end of today, I would be bitterly disappointed if anyone in here actually thought I was an agreeable, pleasant, and approachable individual. In other words, I want to make you all, each and every one of you, a little bit more uncomfortable. So, let me give you 2 reasons, just 2 reasons, as to why you will never believe. And the first one, let me put it as bluntly as I possibly can. The first one is simply because you actually don't want to. You simply don't want to. And you may be saying to yourself, how can you be so stupid? You know, I've come along here today. I'm actually in attendance trying to understand what this whole Christianity thing is all about. How can I say such a thing as that? And the reason why I say that is because of the nature of what the Bible says our hearts are like. The nature of our hearts. Doesn't matter how many arguments you're given, doesn't matter how convincing the evidence may be, doesn't matter what reason someone might present to you. It's the nature of our hearts. You will never believe simply because you don't want to. Our hearts, throughout the course of the Bible, written over thousands of years across many different cultures, all has one story. And one of the stories is our hearts. Our hearts are it says, dangerously deceitful. And so an Old Testament prophet says this about our hearts. Our hearts are above all deceitful. They are desperately sick. Who can understand them? And I'm sure you know that to be the case. I'm sure you still struggle to understand why you do certain things, even though you don't want to do them. Our hearts are deeply deceitful. They're wrongfully devoted, the Bible says. The reason why you will never believe in God is because you already believe too much in yourself. They're wrongfully devoted. And so Jesus, picking up the Shema, which is from Deuteronomy, he says in Mark's Gospel, he says, look, here's what you need to do. You need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. In other words, you need to organize your entire existence around this one reality. You need to see that love in that context means trust, rely, depend, and give your life over to. That means that your deepest desires will be met in Him. Your deepest joys will be satisfied in Him. That regardless of cultural or intellectual opinion, you will agree in your mind with Him. Socially and morally, you will resolve to follow Him. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And there's not one person in here today who can tell me that that's easy. You think that's easy? Think again. Our hearts are wrongfully devoted. We will never believe in God because actually, at the end of the day, we believe too much in ourselves. But as if that's not enough, the diagnosis gets even worse still. Because our hearts are not only deeply divided, wrongfully devoted, but actually, when it comes to spiritual reality, they're completely and utterly dead. Dead, that is, I said. Completely and utterly dead to the things that matter most to God. Now that doesn't mean that you will never do good and be neighbourly to those around you. It doesn't mean that you will never appreciate beauty and be filled with awe and wonder. But what it does mean is that when it comes to what matters most to God, we're spiritually flatlining. We're deeply divided. We're wrongfully devoted. And when it comes to what matters most to God, we're spiritually dead. At which point you should now be thinking, well then, what? How does anyone come to believe if that's the case? And if that is what you're thinking, then I want to say good. Because that's exactly what you should be thinking. Jesus actually was doing something similar with his disciples. And they were astonished at what he was saying about the inability of people to believe. And he looked at them and he brought them right to the brink and he said, look, with man, this is impossible. It's impossible. But then he finished that little episode simply by saying, with man, that's impossible. But with God, all things are possible. So reason number one. And please, afterwards, we're going to break. There'll be tea, coffee, and all that sort of stuff. Still more. Come and speak to me. Come and pin me down. Not literally, but, come and question me about these things. Like Johnny was saying, this is an open conversation. In many ways, I'm trying to be intentionally provocative, and I want to know what you're thinking about what I'm saying. Because I do think it is provocative. I really don't think you're going to hear much of this type of stuff in an institution such as we're in. And believe you me, I know, because I've been through it twice myself. I did it as an undergrad and then as a postgrad. And what I'm saying to you today is like a different language to the air that you breathe. Reason number one, why is it that you're never going to believe? Well, actually, simply because you don't want to. Reason number two as to why I think you're never going to believe. And this is actually what I really wanted to say today. I think the most troubling reason why a skeptic, perhaps like yourself here today, is never going to believe is actually because far too few Christians give you anything that's really worth believing anyway. Far too few Christians actually give you anything worth believing today. And so what I've done, actually what I've tried to do in the first part of this talk, is yes, confront you. To try and open up a little bit more space in your mind, but far too few Christians are ever going to be prepared to do that for you. There's a man called Michael Hart, and he wrote a book called 100 Most Influential People in History. And he's looking back over 2,000 years. Before Mark Zuckerberg came along, he's probably the most influential person in history now, right? Or something like that, the Twitter or whatever. But he was before Mark Zuckerberg. He's looking back over the 2,000 years, and he had one criterion as to judging the impact that people had on other individuals. And his one impact was simply influence. And so who do you think actually came to the top of the order? Who do you think came in first place? The 100 most influential people in history. Reading it with my very particular Christian perspective, I was expecting when I opened the book to find that actually, well, it would be Jesus Christ. Surely he's influenced more people than anybody else. But no. And so I was ready to argue with Michael Hart as to why that should be the case. But he had already thought of my arguments as I read the book. And this is what he said. He said, sorry, I should probably tell you as to who came in number one, shouldn't I? First came Muhammad. Then came, let me just check to get this right, because I think I was just talking about him a minute ago. First came Muhammad. Then came Isaac Newton. Interestingly. Trailing in third place, then and only then, did Jesus Christ make his appearance. And he says this, Michael Hart says this. He says, I'm neither a Muslim nor a Christian, but in my observation, Muhammad has far more influence in the lives of Muslims than Jesus Christ has in the lives of Christians. The reason why you're unlikely ever to believe is because far too few Christians give you anything worth believing in anyway. Jesus said, actually, in one of the most famous sermons that was ever preached, it's a fine piece of literature, if nothing else, but in the Sermon on the Mount, he said this, you are the light of the world, talking to his disciples. You're the salt of the earth. And that at least means that you should be seen to make a difference. It at least means that you should actually, in fact, be making a difference. Light will help people see the world in a way that they never have. Salt will transform it much as it does in anything you put it on. And yet far too few Christians actually ever understand this. When was the last time? I'd love to know. Come and tell me afterwards. When was the last time a Christian in here actually made a meaningful difference in any of your lives? If you're here as a skeptic, when was the last time a Christian ever made a difference in any of your lives? Okay, they may have invited you here today. But apart from that, when was the last time a Christian actually made a meaningful difference in any of your lives? And what I mean by difference is a Christian difference. Not just a Christian social worker type idea, doing you good for your well-being here and now, but actually showed some concern for your soul. When was the last time a Christian actually did that for you? Story of two university students, and they both were interested in Christian things, and they went around to a meeting similar to this one actually, and they met a couple of Christians, and they had questions that they got unsatisfactory answers to. But one Christian in particular wanted to move things forward for these two students. And so this one Christian took these two students to a mature master's degree student. His name was Dave. It's not me. This isn't my story. His name was Dave. And Dave was infamous in the college, actually, for his ability to talk to people about Jesus and to live in a way that was different, noticeably different to everybody else. And so this student brought these two friends along to meet Dave. And the first student came and he said to Dave, he said, "Look, Dave, I'm at university now. I've got some time on my hands, and I want to know more about the religions of the world. I want to look at Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism. I want to know, and I'd like to know a little bit more about Christianity." And Dave, this mature Christian student, looked at this friend and said, "Look, I've got no time for you. When you really want to know about Jesus Christ, then come back and speak to me. But I've got a heavy workload, I've got lots on. My time is in heavy demand. I've got no time for you. Sorry, come back to me when you're actually interested in finding out more." Can you imagine being the second student faced with Dave then? Dave looked at him and said, "Now why are you here?" Now listen to this. Second student said to Dave, "Look, I've an idea about what Christianity is about. I've listened to other Christians talk and I've read a little bit of the Bible for myself. But look, I've come from a decent home. My parents are hardworking, they raised me the right way. I know the difference between good and wrong. And as far as I can see, there is actually nothing really that divides me from you. So what is it that makes you think as a Christian that I should listen to you?" And do you know what Dave said at that point? He looked at that student and he said two words that changed his life. He looked at that student and he said, "You," well, he didn't say you, he simply said, "Watch me. Watch me. Watch the way I go about my work. Watch the way I interact with my fellow students. Watch what I do with my time and how I spend my money. Look at the priorities that characterize my life. Watch me." And that young student took up the offer. And after a year, that young student was claiming himself then to be a Christian. Jesus said in that Sermon on the Mount, where he talked about you being the light of the world and the salt of the earth, he also said this: if the salt loses its saltiness, then it's only worthy to be trampled underfoot. And that's why I began my talk by saying, there's plenty of time, just want you to do it, that's okay. That's why I began my talk by saying that what I wanted to show you today is something as to why you will never believe, and neither should you. Because far too few Christians actually are going to give you something worth believing in anyway. So where to from now on? What's going to happen next? I mean, this is actually just the beginning of this series of talks. I hope I haven't completely derailed it in its first meeting. Over the next number of months, you're going to be hearing reasons. You're going to be given arguments. Some of the toughest questions against Christianity are going to be answered here in these lunchtime talks. I really do hope that you can come back. But what I want you to do from today, well, firstly, if you've come with a Christian student, or if you know Christian students, can I ask you to please hold them to account? Look, you see if the claims of the Bible are true and what Jesus said actually is going to happen, then it is worth a little bit of your time to look into it. So hold the Christians that you know, perhaps who have brought you here today, hold them to account, would you? Get them actually to tell you what it is that they really believe. Please. You'll see on the way out, actually, there's a little gospel. I think it's John's gospel, one of the 4 gospels. Essentially, it's the life story of Jesus, written from the perspective of a man called John. John was one of his best friends. Take this with you. Find another Christian and sit down and read it with them, would you? Hold Christians to account. But secondly, hold yourself to account, would you? And make sure that you know what Christianity is before you reject it. For many of you, I'm thinking perhaps this is the first time you're dipping your toe in or seriously prepared to consider it. So hold yourself to account and make sure that you know what Christianity is, what it truly is, before you reject it. Because, look, I know far too many people who have imbibed the hearsay of another form of Christianity. And what they have rejected, I would have rejected as well if it was Christianity, if it was real if it was supposed to be real Christianity. But look into it, hold yourself to account. And lastly, hold God to account. One of the really amazing things in the Bible is that God is prepared to put himself out there. God is actually prepared to open himself up and for you to hold him to account on his promises. You can read the stories of some of the greats in the Bible, like Moses, for example. He holds God to account, and he said, "You promised this. Now please deliver." I suppose what I want to say to you today is that do the same. Hold him to account, because he has promised that if you're genuinely searching, if you are really interested, then he will not turn you away. And what is impossible with man, as Jesus said, for God, all things are possible.